Most people think that being nice is always a good thing. They assume kindness automatically makes you a better human being. But no one warns you about the hidden cost of being too nice. No one tells you how it slowly erodes your identity, your voice, your sense of worth. No one tells you how it destroys you quietly, politely, and silently, the same way you've been trained to behave. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Not because I need it, but because you probably need to hear more truths like this, truths you've avoided your whole life. Let's start with something simple but uncomfortable. If you are too nice, you are not being kind, you are being afraid. You're afraid of rejection. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being seen as difficult or selfish or demanding. But the real fear, the one beneath all the other fears, is the fear of being yourself. Somewhere in your past, you learned that your true self wasn't acceptable. So you created a softer version. A quieter version. A version that wouldn't upset anyone. You built an identity made of politeness, compliance, and endless tolerance. And people loved that version of you, not because it was real but because it was convenient. Here's the truth. People don't fall in love with your kindness. They fall in love with how easy you make their lives. And that's exactly the problem. Because when you are too nice, you don't just avoid conflict with others. You avoid conflict with yourself. You silence the voice inside you when it disagrees. You suppress your emotions when they don't fit the image you think you must maintain. You avoid your own truth because you're terrified it might shake the stability you've built through years of self-abandonment. But the stability isn't real. It's fragile. It's conditional. It depends entirely on your ability to keep performing the role of the nice one. Let me ask you something you've avoided asking yourself. When was the last time you said what you actually meant? When was the last time you set a boundary without apologizing? When was the last time you allowed yourself to disappoint someone? When was the last time you chose yourself? If your answer is, I don't know, then this isn't a personality trait. It's a coping mechanism. People who are excessively nice share something in common. They grew up in environments where honesty felt dangerous. Maybe your parents were unpredictable. Maybe they withheld love when you expressed anger. Maybe they rewarded your silence. Maybe they punished your authenticity. Maybe you learned that your feelings were too much. So you adapted. You learned to smile when you were hurt. You learned to agree when you disagreed. You learned to make yourself small so others felt big. You learned to be easy to love even if it meant not loving yourself. This is where people misunderstand niceness. They think you're gentle. They think you're selfless. They think you're peaceful. But they don't see the storm inside. They don't see the resentment building like pressure under your ribs. They don't see the loneliness that comes from never showing anyone who you truly are. They don't see the exhaustion of carrying the emotional responsibility for everyone around you. There's a kind of anger that lives inside people pleasers, a silent, hidden anger. Not the explosive kind. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that festers slowly because you never let it breathe. It settles into your muscles, your stomach, your chest. It becomes anxiety. It becomes tension. It becomes overthinking. It becomes burnout. Your body knows every time you betray yourself. Your mind remembers every time you silenced your truth. Your soul carries every moment where you said yes, while choking on the no inside your throat. This is why excessively nice people eventually break. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gradually. The breakdown looks like numbness, loss of joy, emotional fatigue, overthinking every interaction, feeling invisible even in a crowded room, feeling alone even when surrounded by people you've spent years trying to please. Niceness becomes a prison. A polite, socially acceptable prison. The walls are made of your own fear. The lock is made of your own guilt. And the key is in your hand, but you're too afraid to use it. Let me tell you something you may not believe yet. You are allowed to disappoint people. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to stop performing kindness when it costs you your peace. Your life does not improve when you become more agreeable. Your life improves when you become more authentic. Real kindness is honest. Real kindness has boundaries. Real kindness comes from strength, not fear. You cannot keep sacrificing yourself to maintain relationships that only exist because you shrink yourself for them. That isn't love, that's survival. And I promise you, the people who only love you when you're small will never love you when you grow. But growth is coming. It starts when you become tired of your own performance. It starts when you feel a quiet anger rising in your chest. It starts when you realize that your niceness is killing you slowly. It starts when you tell the truth for the first time, not to others but to yourself. You cannot build a real life on top of a false personality. You cannot build deep love on top of shallow honesty. You cannot build inner peace while constantly betraying your own soul. If you want freedom, you have to stop being the person who makes everyone else comfortable at the cost of your own discomfort. This is the beginning. The moment you stop being too nice is the moment your real life begins. But before that happens, there is something you need to understand. Breaking the habit of people-pleasing feels like breaking a rule you didn't know you were allowed to break. Feels like doing something wrong. Feels like you're hurting people. It feels like you're becoming selfish. But none of that is true. What's actually happening is this. You're finally choosing yourself and your nervous system isn't used to it. Let's go deeper. People-pleasers struggle with one thing more than anything else. The fear of being misunderstood. You bend your truth to protect someone else's perception of you. You shape your personality around what you think they want. You hide your frustration because you don't want to appear ungrateful. You stay silent when something hurts you because you don't want to seem dramatic. But here is the truth most people never learn. Being misunderstood is not dangerous. Being misrepresented is not fatal. Being disliked is not the end of your life. What is dangerous is abandoning yourself in order to avoid those things. For years, maybe decades, you've trained yourself to be agreeable, to be low maintenance, to be emotionally predictable, to be the person who never causes a ripple in the water. And because of that, you've surrounded yourself with people who don't know you, not the real you. They know the version that never says no. They know the version that forgives too quickly. They know the version that carries the weight of the relationship. They know the version that never asks for anything in return. But imagine what would happen if you stopped performing. Imagine if you became honest. Imagine if you set boundaries without apology. Imagine if you allowed people to feel disappointed without rushing to fix it. Imagine if you said, "This doesn't work for me," without over-explaining. Some people would leave. Some people would fight it. Some people would try to shame you. Some people would call you selfish because they benefited from your self-neglect. Let them leave. Let them talk. Let them show their true colors. Because the people who love you only when you are easy are not your people. You don't need people who love your compliance. You need people who love your authenticity. You need people who respect your boundaries. You need people who don't crumble when you express your truth. And those people only appear when you stop pretending. Now let's talk about guilt, the emotion that traps people-pleasers more than anything else. Guilt appears every time you try to change the pattern. You say no, and guilt floods in. You express your needs and guilt whispers, "You're being too much." You set a boundary and guilt says, "You're hurting them." But guilt is not a sign you're doing something wrong. Guilt is a sign you're doing something new. You've spent so long abandoning yourself that choosing yourself feels unnatural. But feelings are not facts. Guilt is not guidance. It's a residue of your old identity, the identity that kept you small, silent, and scared. Here's something important. You cannot heal while staying loyal to the version of yourself created by fear. To become your real self, you must grieve the old one. You must let go of the identity that was built to please others. You must let go of the idea that love is something you earn through sacrifice. You must let go of the belief that your needs are a burden. And most importantly, you must let go of the fantasy that being nice will protect you from pain. It won't. It never has. It only delays the pain, buries it, and turns it into something heavier, something that eats you from the inside. Let's explore something deeper: resentment. People pleasers hate admitting it, but resentment is the shadow that follows them everywhere. You resent people for asking so much of you. You resent yourself for giving so much. You resent the imbalance. You resent the silence. You resent the way others walk over boundaries you never expressed. You resent the way no one checks on you even though you check on everyone else. You resent the invisible labor you perform every day to keep relationships alive. But resentment isn't a flaw. It's a compass. It points directly to where you've been abandoning yourself. Every moment of resentment carries a message. This should have been a boundary. If you listen closely, resentment becomes your teacher. It shows you where you're exhausted. It shows you where you've been overgiving. It shows you where you've been tolerating things that hurt you. And once you see it clearly, you can no longer pretend you're okay. Now let's talk about something that terrifies people pleasers: conflict. You think avoiding conflict protects your relationships. But avoiding conflict destroys them more than honesty ever will. Because conflict avoided becomes resentment accumulated. And resentment accumulated becomes connection destroyed. Healthy conflict is not a sign of dysfunction. It is a sign of truth. It is a sign that both people are real. It is a sign that both voices are allowed to exist. When you stop avoiding conflict, you stop avoiding yourself. You discover that expressing your needs doesn't make you unlovable. You discover that saying no won't make people abandon you. You discover that having an opinion doesn't make you difficult. You discover that honesty creates intimacy, not distance. Let me say something you need to hear. The people who truly love you don't want your obedience, they want your presence. They want to know you, not the mask you've been wearing. And you deserve relationships where you are not performing. Relationships where you can be messy. Where you can be honest. Where you can be human. Where you don't have to monitor every word to keep the peace. Now let's reach the core. Being too nice is not love. It is self-abandonment disguised as kindness. But you can change. You can evolve. You can rebuild yourself into someone who is both kind and strong. Someone who gives without resentment. Someone who loves without losing themselves. Someone who sets boundaries without guilt. Someone who speaks gently but truthfully. Someone who can say no with clarity and yes with integrity. This version of you is waiting. Not in the future. But right here, underneath the layers of fear and compliance. All you have to do is choose yourself. And if you made it this far, you probably needed to hear this message. So take a moment now, like this video and subscribe for more. Not for the algorithm, but because you're ready to stop being the background character in your own life. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having the courage to become who you truly are.